Good morning and welcome to the pre-bid conference for ITB 43 FY22, the main entrance relocation and renovations to Gunston Middle School project. I'm David Webb, the procurement agent for Arlington Public Schools. During the conference, I will be reviewing the ITB and highlighting those areas which are considered to be of interest. Also representing APS today during the conference are Ben Bergen, Assistant Director, Design and Construction, Matt Williams, the APS Project Manager, and Amy Olenek from HCM, the Architect of Record. Following the conference, bidders will have the opportunity to visit the Gunston site. Bidders interested in doing so are required to contact Matt Williams to make arrangements. Matt's contact details can be found in the ITB. The site visit is scheduled to start at 1 p.m. More information can be found in the ITB and will be addressed later during the conference. Questions are welcome during the conference and will need to be submitted in writing through the Q&A capability. Questions will be addressed at the end of the conference. The conference is being recorded and a copy will be posted on the current solicitation page of the Procurement Office website. It is emphasised that it is the responsibility of the bidders to make themselves familiar with the requirements of the project and that bids are submitted in accordance with the bid documents. And now I'll start the review of the invitation to bid. Reference number is bid 43 FY22, as mentioned before. It's the main entrance relocation and renovations to Gunston Middle School. The closing date for bids is March the 1st, no later than 11:59 p.m. and the bid opening time is scheduled currently on March the 2nd, but may be subject to change. If it is changed, bidders will be notified through EVA and also on the Arlington Public Schools website as well. Sealed bids for the ITB will be solely received electronically through a secure cloud-based file sharing platform as described and explained in this ITB, referred to as being the platform. Bids shall not be received at the Syfax Education Centre by mail, express mail, in person or by courier. Bidders wishing to submit a bid in response to the ITB are required to upload the mandatory requirements found in the instructions to bidders into the platform through the link found on the current solicitations webpage, which can be located by accessing the APS Procurement Office website. A link to the webpage is provided below. Found under the due date column of the ITB of the current solicitation table is a link for bidders to submit their bids. To assist bidders with the submission of their respective bids, screenshots of the steps required to submit the bid are attached at Appendix One to this ITB, and I'll address that later on. For a bid to be considered for award of a contract, the bid must be received in the platform by no later than 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, March the 1st. Bidders are strongly encouraged to submit their bids in advance of the bid closing to allow sufficient time for the bids to be uploaded into the platform before bid closing. Bids received after the closing date shall not be considered. Again, just to emphasise that bids shall not be opened and announced in the Syfax Education Centre, but will be done so virtually, currently scheduled at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, March the 2nd. Bidders who wish to participate need to use Microsoft Teams. And there's a link provided again on the Procurement Office website for people who wish to view the bid opening. The bid documents, drawings and specifications for this project are available electronically as PDF file format on the owner's representative architect HCM's FTP site. Login and password information for the FTP site will be mailed to all interested bidders upon request. And here's Amy's contact information. Anybody who hasn't already reached out, please do so to get the information. Pre-bid conference today has been held. It is non-mandatory. And afterwards, as I mentioned previously, there is the opportunity to examine the site, and that will be addressed later on in this conference. Bidder's question. questions should be addressed to myself. Contact details here, to Matt, contact details provided, and also to Amy as well. The current closing date time is February the 11th at 5 p.m. My office will issue written answers to all questions timely submitted, either through an addendum or through an information item. The addendum is the method in which the ITB is amended. We shall post the addendum on the APS website and on EVA, and it remains the responsibility of each bidder to access this information. The same applies for an information item, posted again on EVA and on the APS website. Anything issued through an information item does not change the ITB. Again, just re-emphasising the bidders wishing to submit a bid in response to the ITB are required to upload the mandatory requirements found in the instructions to bidders in the platform. Sorry, into the platform through the link found on the current solicitation web page. Again, just to re-emphasise the bid closing and opening times. And now, project description and background. I'll pass it over to Matt.
Good morning. Thanks, David. So the project is an interior renovation with an addition of a small security vestibule entrance. The interior scope of work includes relocating the existing administrative suite to the front of the building, which is closest to the bus loop, and moving the displaced academic spaces, which are 2 science classrooms and some storage areas, to the former administrative suite location. So we're just flip-flopping the admin suite with some academic spaces. We're also replacing an existing storefront elevation and adding a small security vestibule at the new near the new admin area. At this location, the existing sidewalk and adjacent lobby areas have sunk over the years. So to address this, we're replacing the sidewalk and enhancing the foundations at this area with helical piers that rest on concrete grade beams. It's also worth noting that there was a hazmat survey conducted, Division 13 of the specs. The asbestos and lead identified is very minimal, but I urge you to take a look at Division 13. And there are also 2 sole source vendors that you'll notice in the documents. Those are Johnson Controls and Automated Logic, and both should be in attendance this afternoon at our site walk. And that's about it, David.
Thanks, Matt. Information is provided in a situation where the bid exceeds the amount of the budget. It just explains what the process is. APS has the opportunity of revisiting the bid and trying to get the price within the overall budget. It's worth noting that the funds available for this project will be announced after bid closing and before the bid opening. Again, here it just explains the different steps that APS can take to reach that goal. Moving on to the instructions to bidders. Later on, we'll address that there are mandatory requirements. There are Class 1 and there are Class 2 mandatory requirements. Those that are deemed to be Class 1 must be provided with the bid. Those that are deemed to be Class 2 can be provided, and I encourage that they are provided with the bid, but if they're not, then there's a time allowance in which that information is to be provided, and we'll address that in greater detail. To save going through a number of pages that don't contain any comments, I'm going to now jump to the examination of the site. So the site visit then will be done with the coordination of Matt. His contact information is here, email, and also his phone number. It's due to start at 1 p.m. There is a restriction on the number of representatives from the bidders, so please respect that. Wearing face coverings, We're going to, at the moment, it's going to be restricted to a maximum of 9. If it exceeds that amount, then there's a possibility of having a second visit. Meeting at door number 1, and bidders are not permitted to enter the building without Matt being present.
One clarification, David, if we exceed 9, the plan is to do one walkthrough with one group, and then I'll pick up that second group after the first one's finished.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks.
Yep.
All right, just moving on. Minimum qualifications of bidders, we'll address that later on. It's an Appendix A to the bid form, and it is a Class 1 mandatory requirement. The mandatory requirements, the following are Class 1 and must accompany your bid. Information on your Virginia Class A contractor's license. It's been considered that for this project, these classifications and specialties are required. If the bidder, the GC, is self-performing, then they need to have these classifications and specialties. If they are going to use subcontractors, then those subcontractors performing the work, in addition to having the Class A license, need to have the appropriate classification and or the specialty service for the work they're performing. With the bid is a bid security in the form of a bid form that's provided later on in the documentation for the amount of 5% of the total bid. You need to have the bid form completed and the Appendix A to the bid form. If the bid is a joint venture, a copy of the written joint venture agreement is required. And the same applies if it's a partnership, a copy of the written partnership agreement is required to be submitted with the bid. The following are Class 2 mandatory requirements. They're still required, but bidders are given the opportunity to either provide them with their bid, which is recommended, or they can provide them within the timeline presented. For some, it's 5 days, and for others, or for another one, it's the next business day. The Class 2 is a list of the subcontractors for the major divisions, annual features of work, which we'll address later on. Also, the same applies for information on the pricing breakdown for the total bid, and a completed insurance coverage checklist, which I'll address later on. Those are needed to be part of the bid. And so if a Class 2 mandatory requirement is not provided with the bid of the apparent low bidder, the apparent low bidder will be notified by the procurement office that the omitted Class 2 mandatory requirements must be received by the procurement office by no later than 5 p.m. on the 5th business day following the notice to provide the information. Failure of the apparent low bidder to provide the omitted Class 2 mandatory requirements within the stated time frame will result in the bid from the apparent low bidder being considered non-responsive and no longer considered for contract award. Pricing breakdown for the total bid is to be provided in compliance with the requirements of item 13 of the bid form. Again, the recommendation is that you provide this information with your bid to avoid the unfortunate situation where you don't provide it then within the 5th business day following notice. Moving on to the bid form. This is going to be provided by yourselves, completed and submitted. Name of the bidder goes in here. Submit the bid by uploading into the platform as we previously discussed. Again, just addressing what are deemed to be Class 1 mandatory requirements that must be attached and made part of the bid. And then the Class 2, bidder will check A or B to confirm it's been attached and made part of the bid, or B, whether it's going to be supplemented at a later stage. Again, clarification, confirmation that anybody submitting a bid needs to have the appropriate contractor's license. Information provided here, the class number valid until, classifications and specialty services. the addenda, bidders can either check the box to confirm that they've received and acknowledged the addenda, or they can send in a copy of the addenda with their bid. Total amount in writing is provided, and also in figures as well. Just to, again, re-emphasize that the funds available for the project will be announced immediately after bid closing, and prior to the bid opening. Pricing breakdown for the total bid above. As I mentioned before, we have the 5 days set for some. This particular requirement here, the information is a Class 2 mandatory requirement. Bidders may elect not to include the information in its bid as submitted for bid closing. If not included in the bid submitted for bid closing, this information and this form must be received by the procurement office no later than 4 p.m. the next business day following the bid opening, or the bid will be deemed non-responsive and not considered further. The divisions. There are no bid alternates on this project. Bidder then completes the information for the contact for administration. State Corporation Commissioner identification number needs to be included. Check the box, whichever is appropriate, and provide your number. Again, more information on the license requirements. List of subcontractors. So these the list below, if the bidder intends to self-perform, then it needs to provide the information as a Class 1 mandatory that it holds all the classifications and specialty services to perform the work. If it's not going to perform the work for this particular work here, then it needs to provide the information on the subcontractor's license and the expiration date. And then we'll check to make sure they have the appropriate specialty services and classifications. Later, for those subcontractors who are not identified here, then there will be a requirement for the GC, the bidder, to provide that information 14 days after notice to proceed. Just going through and just checking the boxes. The person signing must be authorized to bind the bidder in contractual matters. This is the Appendix A to the bid form, the bidder's qualifications. Describing here the experience that we're looking at. The bidder then to check the boxes to confirm. Looking for information on their performance on previous contracts. And then we're looking for their experience, performance, and they provide then information on the 3 projects that we've asked for information above. So, so go through and complete project 2, 3 projects, and please provide the information that we're asking for. And then key personnel, project superintendent and the project manager. Check the box, please provide the resumes as well. As mentioned earlier, as a standard bid bond that is a Class 1 mandatory requirement, it needs to be submitted with the bid. AIA versions of this will not be accepted, so please complete this form here as provided. That's the bid bond. The agreement between the owner and the contractor, so the successful bidder. This is the documentation that will be completed. Contract period. schedule is that currently planned April 21st, the NTP for the project administrative deliverables, June 21st, NTP for the project site mobilization and construction, August the 15th, substantial completion, and September the 29th, project final completion. Contract sum, again in writing and in figures. Liquidated damages are applicable to this project and contract. The amounts are set out here, $1,500 for substantial and $500 for final. Requirements for the payment bond and also a performance bond. Again, the AIA version of these will not be accepted. So the successful bidder, the contractor, will be required to complete these. Again, all right. Now we've reached the general conditions. I'm not going to go through and discuss these. So I'm going to jump now to the end of these. Appendix 1. These are the screenshots of the steps required to submit a bid. Here's the link on the web page, just to kind of give you guidance. Obviously, it's a fictitious requirement, and it just kind of takes you through step by step what the bidder is required to do. I am prepared to respond to acknowledge that a bid has been, because I get notification as well. I am prepared to acknowledge that a document has been uploaded into the platform. But obviously I can't go in and open it up to confirm what's inside. So if anybody's interested, I am prepared to acknowledge receipt of an uploading document. And just step by step. Information here about COVID instructions. And then finally, we have the insurance coverage checklist. And again, this is a Class 2 mandatory requirement. And here, the bidder is required to check that they have the appropriate insurance, or they can get the appropriate insurance. And then here we have the insurance agent's statement to confirm. And that's that. So that concludes the ITB. Matt, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Just one thing, David, about the site visit today. You can park over by door 6. There's a big parking lot there, and then you'll have to walk around to the side of the building. The numbers will get lower and lower until you get to door number 1, and that's where we'll meet today. That's it, David.
All right. I'm just checking for any kind of questions here. I don't see any questions provided. Maybe there'll be more questions asked during the other site visits. All right. Okay. If there's nothing else, I'd like to thank everybody for their interest in attending the pre-bid conference. As Matt said, that the site visit will start at 1 o'clock. Anybody who's interested, please meet Matt at the door number 1. That's all.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.